Maybe don't know.
This time, this time, this time, this time, this time to build. 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 This time power. This time to build power. This time to build power. This time to build power.
What's up, everybody? I am your host, Chris Hampton. Welcome to episode 22 of the Power Company Podcast, brought to you by PowerCompanyClimbing.com. I actually tried to record this intro a couple of times and false started and realized I hadn't had any coffee this morning. So now I'm caffeinated and I'm good to go. I am sitting here at my friend Paul Morley's house in Chattanooga, exactly in the spot where I started this thing damn near a year ago. We've got about 2 weeks before our year birthday. Maybe not even that long. Maybe 10 days, something like that. And if you were thinking about getting us a birthday gift, then a rating and a review on iTunes would be great. I'm told that those ratings and reviews are the most important part of the algorithm that gets you in front of new people. So there's that. That's all I know about it. And we really appreciate the reviews. We've gotten some really great ones. One here I'm looking at right now from the Dirtbag Dad that says, if you're a climber looking to explore focused and programmatic training, that's a good word, by the way, go no further. Intelligent, funny, and real. Every episode has had at least one key takeaway for me that has proven very useful. There's a whole new dimension out there for my climbing. Looking forward to taking it to a new level. Plus, the theme music is awesome and well chosen. Thanks, Dirtbag Dad. We appreciate that. And we appreciate all your support. I see you out there on the Instagrams. So thanks for that. Yeah, and if you're one of those people that insists on buying a gift because giving us a rating or review doesn't cost you anything, then you can become a patron. You can go to our website, PowerCompanyClimbing.com, click on the podcast tab, become a patron, or you can click on apparel and buy a t-shirt. All those things help. They all go back into making this podcast better and our website better, and it goes to good things for you. And this year, I've been thinking a lot about this, and Nate and I were talking recently, and the most surprising thing, besides the fact that it's been a year already, is that we've really built this cool community. So thank you guys for that. That means a ton. And everywhere I go, people recognize the Power Company and want to talk about the Power Company, and I think that's a pretty awesome thing. So thanks to you guys. I'm not going to ramble too much here. Again, I'm caffeinated, so I could go forever if I just let that happen. Instead, I'm going to get into today's talk with none other than fan favorite Steve Bechtel. We recorded this past summer in Lander, and I'm not going to tell you what it's about because we've got nearly an hour of Steve telling you what it's about. There's a break in the middle where we were in Steve's gym and someone came to the door that he had to go talk to. So if there's an abrupt break in the middle, that's why. All right, see you guys on the other side.
Maybe don't know.
Perfection is achieved when there's nothing else to take away, and that's a really good general framework of your climbing training.
This time power. This time to build power. This time to build power. This time to build power.
This is like your first official gig as co-host here. I'm going to call this the Steve and Chris show from now on.
Will be, it's going to get pretty boring in a big hurry with just you and me talking.
I don't know. I'm just going to let you talk. That way it doesn't get boring. So what I really want to talk to you about today is this. It's something you've mentioned in a couple of other podcasts, and we've been on other topics, so we've just moved past it. But what you're calling integrated strength training, basically mixing something like a deadlift with bouldering or with hangboarding or something to that effect. So basically, what's the, I can think of a couple of good reasons to do it, but what's the main reason you've seen?
Well, the whole problem with program design, and you probably get the same question I do, is like people go, "Hey, Chris, can you help me design a training program?" And because it gets complicated in a big hurry. And one of the things that climbers do is they start putting together a training program, and it starts turning into, well, when I was a kid, we called them monster cookies. You have chocolate chips and raisins and M&Ms and syrup and jelly, and it just,
that sounds amazing. By
yeah,
the way.
right. But the more you add, the less likely the thing is to stay together.
Right.
And so what I've run into with these training programs is you'll run into a climber that's trying to develop many qualities all at once. And what we're trying to avoid is having so many adaptations that we're trying to make that no adaptations take place. And so when I have a training program that I've got an athlete that needs some basic athleticism, some strength, and they need to get their fingers stronger, and we are maybe bouldering, it's real hard to fit that in the given training cycle.
Yeah.
And so what we started looking at is, if I've got a guy that's lifting heavy on a deadlift, he needs to rest 3 to 5 minutes between sets. And normally what you do, the standard is to sit and read a magazine or talk to somebody that you're training with. Then the same thing happens in hangboard training. Depending what you're doing and depending on the training protocol, the really heavy strength stuff needs to have the same kind of rest, 3 to 5 minutes between super heavy hangs. And then I started looking at it and saying, like, okay, well, wait a second. If because of the layout of our facility, I can have my guy go do a set of squats, then walk over and do a set on the hangboard. And then I've still got plenty of time to recover in between and adjust weight and whatever else. So much time, in fact, that we started adding in a third component in these programs, which was mobility training.
Right.
It's very rare that I run into a climber that doesn't need mobility work. And when we say, oh, stretch between boulder problems or stretch at the end or stretch at the end of the week, it doesn't happen. And anybody that does stretch a lot, those are the guys that don't need it. And so those
are the guys who want to do it more. So.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's like if you're great at something, you're going to want to do it all the time.
Yep.
And so what we do is we sneak it in, and the way I lay the sessions out is to do a hangboard set, a strength set, and then a mobility set. And so you can pretty much just flow between those things at a normal pace. You don't need to be racing. You don't even need to be slowing yourself down, because just the adjustment between those positions gives you enough recovery. By the time I get back to my strength set, I'm probably pretty well recovered. And so our standard for a strength style session would be to do like 3 to 5 reps of a squat, for example, then a hangboard set, and then probably a minute to a minute and a half of a mobility exercise. And then you would do that 3 times through or something. Depending how much volume the athlete can handle. A typical athlete for me can do 3 groups of those 3 exercises 3 times through in a 45 to 60 minute session. And so what that means is you're going to have a little circuit of strength exercise, hangboard, mobility, and you go through that 3 times. That takes about 15 minutes. And then we would pick another strength exercise, another hangboard position, another mobility exercise.
Okay.
And we would do that group 3 times.
Gotcha.
And that would take about 15 minutes. Then we would do a third one. And that would be, a third strength exercise, another hangboard set, and another mobility set. So at the end of the workout, I've been able to do 9 total sets on the hangboard.
Right.
Usually about 9 to 10 minutes of mobility training, which is way more than most people get.
Yeah.
And then I've got that correct volume of the strength stuff. Because again, if you were trying to be the world's best deadlifter, you'd need more deadlifting.
Right.
But with this, I can have you do 3 sets of 2. You can lift pretty darn heavy, and we move on to the next day. The difficulty people have with it is it feels too easy.
Right.
But the numbers don't lie. And after somebody goes through this program for 6 weeks, a couple days a week, we've got some really good numbers and some great finger strength out of it. So I'm really happy with the plan.
Cool. How would you had mentioned using deadlifting with bouldering, particularly in your book, in the most recent book. How would you integrate that? Would it be the same sort of thing? Do you keep a timer for your bouldering, or is it a number of moves that you're aiming at? What's the goal?
There's a couple ways, and it depends on what the goal of the bouldering session is. We if we're doing limit bouldering, that's like super high level, I don't like to have anything else mixed in with it. Gotcha. And that's a very tough way to train, because hard bouldering with your friends is fun. But it very often gets directed away from your specific training needs.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the best things in the world is the guy in his shed working boulder problems all by himself late into the night, because it allows the athlete to really focus on what he needs. The pacing isn't wrong. Right. An athlete training alone tends to rest enough. And you don't get hijacked by somebody else's goals. And that very frequently in any group of climbers, there's going to be one guy that always dictates where they boulder, how late they go, what time they leave, all those sorts of things.
Yeah. Not to mention your own ego, which is a pretty tough thing to ignore.
Yeah.
I definitely found this winter was the first time I ever bouldered solo outside. And it made a big difference for me to go out and do solo sessions where I could really just dig into a problem and not give a damn what anybody else thinks. And, even though I try to let go of my ego in the gym, I definitely notice sometimes that it's happening.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that's one of the great things about having a training plan and a log that says, my goal today is to do, 25 touches on the campus board. I'm going to be doing, 1-4-6, and I'm doing that on my left and right side. It's very, very clear, and it doesn't turn into like, testosterone driven
bro session.
Yeah. Like, then pretty soon we're invading Troy, so, there's like all bad things come from guys competing with each other.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so with limit bouldering, you don't like to add it in. When bouldering, do you add this stuff in?
I think bouldering is really useful as a slightly less than maximum intensity session, where we would go back. Say if your limit bouldering level is V9, V10, you'd be working V5 to V7 problems, things you could do in 1 to 3 goes. Where you're still having to work your technique pretty hard.
Yeah, it gives you a chance to really focus on perfecting what you're doing.
Yeah. And I really like that format. Like we go in and we work a boulder problem, and I like to have an athlete, even if they send it, work it until they do the movement perfectionally.
Perfectionally.
They want to do it perfect, right? They've gone.
I need a different co-host.
you're fired, dude. I know. I'm like the Sarah Palin of co-hosts.
Oh boy.
Anyway, so you do this problem, you send your V7 second go, but your feet cut.
Right.
Well, let's work it again until the movement is perfect. It's low enough level that you can work on your technique and recognize movement errors, but it's hard enough that you're actually getting something out of the climbing.
Sure.
If we were climbing on V0, you wouldn't be getting those same values. And so maybe we'll have an athlete spend 15 minutes on one problem, and maybe they'll do it 3, 4, 5 times. At that point, then you could say, okay, we're taking off the shoes. We're going to go in. We're going to do a set of deadlifts, little bit of stretching, set of deadlifts, another little bit of stretching, and then we go back into the bouldering gym.
Okay.
The thing with climbing, although we all agree that climbing is the best climbing, training anywhere, it's so damaging and taxing on the fingers. Skin wise, joints, you name it. We're always limited by the end of the kinetic chain, so to speak. And so I think if you can take these intense bouldering sessions and break them up, and come back in fresh after, like deadlifting isn't easy,
right.
But if you go away from it and go do something else that's keeping you active and warmed up, come back in and you can give it more intensity. And so I think that's a really valuable thing about integrating other sorts of training with the climbing session.
Mm-hmm. And I like it too, not just for the sake of, if you don't have enough time, this is a good way to get everything in, but also because when you're filling your available time, you're much less likely to have a bunch of junk training thrown in there.
Yeah.
And if you can get rid of that stuff, that's a big win.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about that before, where, perfection is achieved when there's nothing else to take away.
Right.
And that's a really good general framework of your climbing training. We've all had enough long layoffs from training, like your shoulder surgery last year. I had a finger injury a couple of years ago that kept me out for the better part of a year. And you still come back from it. Right. And so if we were to say, okay, I'm not going to do any hangboard training for the next 2 months, and all I'm going to work on is my technique, and I'm just going to climb on easy stuff and work on heel hooks and drop knees or whatever your biggest need is. It's like, give me a break. Like 3 months later, your finger strike's going to be right back where it was.
Right. And
all of a sudden you've developed this new skill. We don't want to tap our adaptation potential in too many ways, because if you can spend your physical currency, so to speak, working on some very, very specific and discrete things, you're going to see notable gains there. And I think that's, going back to this original example, is too many different things I'm trying to learn or trying to improve on. They really start to tap us, and especially as we get older.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. This past winter, shortly after coming off of my shoulder surgery, I spent most of my training season, focused only on learning to full crimp and learning to give 100% effort. And rather than just trying super hard and doing, or trying super hard problems and doing giant moves and things like that, things that were going to hurt my shoulder, instead I focused on sort of my attitude coming into a problem and how to pull off the ground immediately, giving 100%. And I ended up, climbing 3 boulders harder than I'd ever climbed before. And that was coming right off of shoulder surgery at 41 years old. So there's definitely something to be said for just working on technique and just working on, the more obtuse sides of training.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't hangboard. I couldn't really lift weights much.
Yeah.
I did a lot of kettlebell swings, but I couldn't do anything overhead, so.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. All the movement pattern stuff that we use in weight training. We always want to press, we always want to pull, we always want to hinge and squat. Well, I've got athletes that can't press overhead. Or a great example personally is I have a bad elbow that gets flared up by pulling, by doing like overhead pulls, like pull downs, pull ups.
Yep.
And so on paper, I should be doing pull ups in all of these sessions. I mean, I want to get stronger for climbing. Pull up is a great exercise. I can't do it. And I haven't done a pull up short of for one specific test in 8 years. Mm-hmm. But I can still climb okay. And so even if we aren't addressing all of those things, or if you've got an athlete that's real nervous about, not keeping their finger strength up, or not, addressing every single facet of their training, that the reality is that we're very, very capable of climbing around those personal limitations.
Yeah, very much so. So other than the time constraint issue, you've also talked about the hormonal response that comes along with it. So let's talk a little about that. Yeah.
So there are a few pathways or ways that we get stronger. We improve our neurological firing, or what we'll call recruitment. The physiologists will talk about rate coding, the way that the muscle fibers align to fire appropriately, and they'll talk about some people will only recruit like 60% of the fibers in a given muscle ever,
right.
And so we can train to recruit more of those. Well, one of the ways that we gain strength and recover from strength is through the activity of like the endocrine system, through hormonal changes, release of testosterone, growth hormone, etc. And what happens there is with strenuous activity, the hormonal activity generally increases. And there are certain things, and it was funny. I kind of came about this in a backward way, but these bodybuilders were talking about how if you were doing an arm day and you're just doing curls, you wouldn't release enough of the hormones to get the maximum gain out of that.
Right. So you need to do some big muscle.
Yeah. So they were saying you got to do some pull-ups with it. And that'll increase your size. And it's like, we laugh at bodybuilders all the time, but they're really, really dialed into what they're doing.
Right.
And so I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of smart. And it just kind of got put in the back of my mind. But then I started thinking about climbers trying to get stronger in the forearms. And like, we've got these guys, like, basically by the time you start getting interested in hangboard training, you're like at 85% of your max strength. Like you're way up there. And so we've got these guys trying to buy 1% at a time. And I started thinking, wow, if we're not releasing enough hormone, because the forearm is a tiny group of muscles and it's primarily endurance muscle fiber. If we're not releasing these hormones, if we're not optimizing the hormone profile with this weight training, we're maybe not getting the most out of a hangboard session. And so I was trying to figure out a way to do hangboarding with intense bouldering session or whatever. And then it just sort of hit me, if we do weight training, we're not again stressing those structures of the finger, and we can up this hormonal action. And really, it's funny, like, I've got you doing a few sets of rack front squats with the kettlebells or something. Yeah, it's great for you to get stronger, increase your athleticism there. But really with the integrated strength, the hormonal thing is the whole reason we do it, is because I want to get your fingers stronger. And it's great that we're also building general athleticism. And so So if we've got, good time constraint, good way to integrate, weight training in with a normal program, then it's a win-win-win straight across with, especially when you include the mobility. But the facility is the challenge for most athletes.
Sure. Yeah, most people aren't going to have that, though it is getting more and more popular for climbing gyms to have, barbells and plates and things like that. So
and I think that, and one of the things that we've been working on is we've got a lot of athletes doing this program, and we've been working on how do we make it happen at home? What are the body weight exercises that are going to help with this?
Right.
Because if you can't have access to, let me back up just a little bit. The way that the movement patterns we'll use with a standard 3-group integrated strength program will be a squat, a hip hinge, and a press. And then you go, okay, well, why not the pull? Because we're already pulling when we're doing the hangboard stuff, and then you're going to probably pull the next day when you're climbing.
We're climbers, and we pull more than enough.
Yeah, and it's really rare that we don't see people that can pull. That of all the movement patterns, that's where most of us are topped out on a standard assessment. And so then I can, if I need to get you hinging, we have some body weight variations on hinging. Like the back bridges, the Cook hip lift, those sorts of things.
Right.
Not super great hormonally, because we really do need to be lifting something heavy. Mm-hmm. But then when we get to the quads, jump squats, pistol squats, those start to run it up, and we can do those at home. Plus, almost everybody has a suitcase or a duffel bag that they can fill with books.
Sure. Yep.
And do a bear hug squat or something. And then pressing, we can usually figure out a push-up variation that's hard enough, or like a handstand style push-up. There's various things that are body weight capable. Weights are really convenient tools, but they're not absolutely necessary for it.
Now, with hinging, would something like the kettlebell swing work?
Yes, for sure. Most people, the kettlebell swing, you have to learn to do it right, and then you have to learn to do it heavy.
Yep.
So I think for a normal guy, you'd probably want to be, this is just spitballing it, but I'd say you'd want to be swinging 2/3 your body weight, something like that. And
if you're doing a one-arm swing, that weight can go down.
Yeah, but again, for just hormonal stuff, you're going to want to stick to the heavy, because the one-arm swing starts to be anti-rotation. Mm-hmm. Very nothing wrong with it and everything right with it as an exercise, but I don't know.
Not as good for the hormonal response.
I don't think the load's quite as much, because it really does matter how much you have to bear down on that.
Right.
So, and learning the double kettlebell swing is good, because most gyms won't have, 140 pound kettlebell. Yep. So now a lot of people I know hangboard, and a lot of my clients do, and you and I have talked about this before, that hangboarding after climbing is a good time to put the hangboard in. If you're going to do this sort of protocol where you're doing integrated strength training with a hangboard and a big lift and mobility, would you still do that after climbing, or is that just too much? Or if it's a low intensity session, maybe, but not a high intensity session. What are your thoughts? So if the climbing day is low intensity, you could probably do an integrated strength session. And by definition, almost every integrated strength session is high intensity.
Right.
Because when you're trying to develop finger strength, you've got to be putting the gas to the floor.
Yep.
So I think that it's probably more appropriate as a seasonal thing. And if we talked about, or separating it out a little bit more. So say I'm red pointing on Saturday, I could maybe do an integrated strength on Monday, and then climb again hard on Thursday, or climb again on Wednesday, and then have another training session on a less intense hangboard session Wednesday night or Thursday.
Gotcha.
But the really hard integrated stuff, it takes a while to recover from. Probably 36 to 48 hours for a young person, and then a little longer for guys like us. So.
Yep. And you said seasonally. How would you put it in seasonally?
Well, and that's the whole thing, right? It depends on how the climber behaves. If they have a long off season and a bad outdoor season, like it's really great. A guy climbing in Cincinnati, like there's big chunks of the year that you're not going to the red.
For sure.
And so then we can get really specific about the demands we're putting on the athlete from climbing. Lander is tough because we can climb outside all the time.
Right.
And it's funny you would say that sucks, but it does make it very hard for our athletes to stay focused on training. And so what I would say is something like an alternating cycle where you would say for 3 weeks, I'm going to focus on integrated strength 2 days a week. Then I'm going to have a recovery week. And then I'm going to do 3 weeks of climbing focus with maybe a little bit of maintenance in there for the hangboard.
Gotcha.
Maintenance level weight training, but not these high intensity sessions for 3 more weeks, and then take a week off and then go back. And alternating between those things I think that sort of thing would be really good. The classical linear plans are okay, or like the block programs that we've talked about. Those are fine, but then it starts to get into what works well for each athlete. Because as you know, when as soon as you build a great training template and you send it off to somebody, it needs to get customized.
Oh yeah,
everybody's special.
Yep. Yeah. In my app, I tried building templates that I could then customize from, and I don't think I've used the templates after about the first 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's every plan just ends up being a completely custom build anyway. So.
Yeah, and so that's where when we do templates driven stuff, we'll say we want to develop these primary qualities this month. Like for me personally, August will be about just building base strength, and so I don't care about how hard I red point. I don't care how much endurance I've got, and all those things I can kind of throw in a little bit of climbing and endurance, but I've done it long enough that I understand that endurance is coming back, and it's going to be 2.5 weeks, and then it's going to be topped out. You just know for yourself as an athlete how long it takes to ramp those things back up. And so I think the thing is, we always go back to is strength is the hardest to develop, but it also sticks with you. And so you spend 3 weeks developing this finger strength. You can put it on the back burner for 3 weeks, and it's going to be fine. And
now, with this integrated strength training, do you think the same sort of principle applies when you're training power? Like, can you take a big lift and then couple it with campus training and get something out of that, get more out of that?
Yeah, I think so. And it's interesting because people get on my case when I say that campus training isn't power training, but it, like, systematically, it's not. Like, I understand we're moving quick, and maybe you would call it speed training. Mark Anderson calls it accuracy training, contact strength training. We can call it all those things. But like, if you've done cleans or snatches, I mean, you know that it's not power or, a huge box jump. But I'm not saying it's a bad exercise, but I'm saying what you're suggesting will make it better. And so because building that explosiveness and the ability to generate force, because power can either be really fast with a light implement, or it can be somewhat fast with a heavy implement.
Right.
Like a kettlebell swing is very light. Not always super light, but compared to what these guys are cleaning,
right?
It's a very light implement, but it's done very quickly. Kettlebell snatches, I think, one of the best conditioning exercises that's non-specific to climbing that there is. And so combining those with your campusing is also a win-win. Now, the thing when we switch to power is the recovery periods are probably a little bit longer. And the recovery periods between sessions are probably a little bit longer. So if you were going to do an integrated power day, we would go explosive total body movement, then a campus set. And that would maybe happen every 10 minutes or every 8 minutes, those two things. Put some mobility in between. And then maybe that only happens every 4 or 5 days. And so the weekly schedule gets screwed up there. And so very often with our templates, we'll look at 1 day, 1 week, 2 days the following week. So in a 4-week cycle, they would get 6 sessions done. Again, these are tough because it doesn't matter how tired the athlete gets. It's the numbers they put up at the end. You know, how much can they do if they're, you know, like we like box jumps. I like some medicine ball work, explosive push-ups. You know, the clapping push-ups are great. And again, if we're integrating it with campusing, we don't do like another pull. You know, you don't do like explosive pull-ups and campusing.
Right.
Because the long
and would
view,
you count something like a snatch as a pull? It's more hinge, but
yeah, it is, but it's like you're pulling from down to up,
right?
And instead of from up to down, so it would be a different movement pattern.
Gotcha. In
general, I know it's we're starting to cross that line, but it would be a different movement pattern in general than the campusing. And the thing is it's so hard, but to take the long view on the campus board and say like I'm campusing for 3 years from now instead of campusing for my project next week.
Okay. Yeah. Let's take a break. Go ahead. Break. What's up, everybody? Chris here. Pardon the interruption. I'll keep this short and sweet. Since this podcast started taking off and we've been growing it, you guys have been asking how you can help out. I've got 3 ways for you. Number 1, you can become a patron. That just means you give a monthly donation to the podcast, $1 and up, and you get something in return. And you can check out what those rewards are at patreon.com/powercompanypodcast. Best of all, we'll keep it sponsor and commercial free for you. Number 2, you can rate us and review us on iTunes. I know it's a pain in the ass to go to iTunes and do all that, but it really helps us out. At least that's what I'm told by the podcast powers that be. And number 3, perhaps the easiest way and the best way to help us out is to share us on your social medias. Anytime you see us post up a new podcast, please share it with your friends. Tag people who will really appreciate it or who need to hear the advice that we're giving. All right. Thank you guys. And back to the show. So during the break, I was looking at this "Work Your Glutes" poster that Charlie's got on the wall. Did some kid make this for him? One of his kids.
It's actually the daughter of one of his athletes, and her daughter came in. I guess the girl's probably 12 or 15, and she was watching her mom work out, and so she made this whole poster for Charlie.
Oh, it's amazing! It says
clinch, side release.
Now you clench and release. You are now going to get a good butt and be stronger. I love it.
That is the saying that Charlie will be known for forever.
Clinch and release.
Clinch and release.
Awesome. Okay. You were just talking about campusing for 3 years from now instead of for next week. So putting money in the bank, as you like to.
Yeah, I think that at some point, and I hate playing like the old guy card, because I actually really feel great climbing these days. But
on this podcast, you can play the old guy card all day.
That's the thing is like you just start to learn like, my God, that is really hard on you.
Yeah.
You know? And so not that it's not good training, but doing too much of it too soon can be. And so if we can slowly progress and slowly add to our ability to do it without getting too hungry, we're going to see a lot longer career and a lot higher peak be able to be attained, rather than like go great guns till you get hurt, take 3 months off, go again till you get hurt, take 3 months off.
Right. Yep.
And
that's a tough cycle.
It is, and we've all been there. And like that's the one thing, if we can have any positive effect on the youth coaches and the youth climbers of today, it's to just like let's do it right. Don't, even though it's fun and it's cool, let's just make sure you don't get to where we have a lifelong injury cycle.
Yeah, for sure. So quick question. If say you're doing a cycle of integrated strength training, and then you deload or you take a week off, and you are then starting to implement integrated power training, do you think that's a good idea to do the two back to back? Is it something that you think there needs to be more rest in between?
I think it probably depends on the athlete, but I think it's fine. I think it's good. And 3 weeks of strength, week off, 3 weeks power is probably a very good cycle. And the funny thing is your performance, because like we're not going to stop climbing. Very rarely do we ask people to not climb while they're doing these training cycles. The funny thing, if we do an alternating cycle like that, is your greatest strength performance, your greatest ability to display finger strength will come during the power phase. And then when we go back to integrated strength again, your greatest displays of bouldering power will come while you're on the hangboard, not while you're doing this hard training. And that's an interesting thing. Yeah. But it's counterintuitive for a lot of climbers. They think the more pumped and fatigued I am, the better my endurance is going to be at the crag.
Right.
But really your best performance comes after the week off, which is the thing that nobody will do.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to make people take a week off.
And like Steve Maish is just the smartest guy out there, but he is like never forget to take week 4 off. And not even off, just go climbing.
Right.
Just get out of the training cycle.
Yep.
I'll tell people that their volume should drop by 50%. And that they should, focus on just going out and having fun. But we get these people that get so obsessive about adding and adding and adding that they will never allow for that time off. And these are the ones that are chronically injured, chronically underperforming, and then they don't know why, because they're also running and they should be thin, right?
Right.
And so the moreness does not lead to betterness.
Yeah, and I think that's true mostly across the board. So another question, if you don't consider campusing to be power training, is there a better climbing exercise to integrate with powerful lifts?
I think power bouldering is undervalued. And what I would say with power bouldering is we're not really set up well for it in most gyms. But what it'd be like on a steep wall, big integrated body movements between big holds.
Right.
And because campusing is, like I said, is really great for rate of force production in the fingers. It's really great for your timing. But like if you're just hanging by your arms, you just can't generate that much power.
Right.
And so if we can do even huge jug campusing is more powerful than what we could do on a typical campus board.
But what you would rather see are big moves incorporating driving with your legs to begin with.
I think that's a big place where people are lacking in their skill.
I agree.
They'll to make a big move and then know that finger's going to dunk and you're going to catch that hold. I mean, a lot of people just don't have that kind of accuracy. They don't have that level of commitment. But if you make, 15 moves with each arm for 3 workouts a week, where you're going for it to a hold, I'm not talking like full on body dynos, but dead points.
Right.
You're going to get to where you're willing to make those kind of big moves. And when you get to a hold that's 2 inches too far away, you're not going to be too worried about it. And I think that's a really critical thing. That it incorporates some total body power, it incorporates speed and accuracy, and I think it's too often that we say this tool, the campus board, is the only way to build power.
Right.
And the hangboard is the only way to build finger strength, and the tread wall is the only way to build endurance. And I think that we limit ourselves a lot there.
So let's go back to power really quick. So I often have, tell me what you think about this. I often have kind of my beginner climbers, or a lot of the climbers who aren't powerful. Like when I started really training for sport climbing, I wasn't powerful at all. I was a lock-off trad climber, you know. So I'll have people in that position practice jumps and practice dead points and practice big moves just on big holds, just easing in, more for the timing and learning to move their body through space like that. Then when they move on to more powerful bouldering, I often ask them to work on things that require tension to hold the positions. So big dead points where they have to keep their feet on. Do you think there's any value in that over doing big moves where your feet are cutting for power development?
Probably it's probably a wash. Probably both of those are developing the ability to go.
Okay.
But your economy improves if you're keeping your feet on. Like, the thing that's just so crazy is if you do any sort of work with measuring force, like if you have your feet on and you're, hanging from, a hangboard, and then your feet cut off, like you have your feet on a stool, then you take them off, like the load increases like crazy.
Sure. And
you have a finite amount of work that your body can do on X route. You want most of that route or that force to be on your feet. And so when your feet are cutting, like, especially, I mean, it's very rare. Like, what is it? Like maybe 5% of climbs. Maybe it's probably not even that many that require that you actually cut your feet at some point.
Yeah, it doesn't happen often. Not on purpose anyway.
Yeah, and it's and really, I think that explosiveness with the feet on is a good thing to learn, because then you learn to initiate tension as soon as you grab the target hold. Like you get there and all of a sudden, your entire posterior chain tightens up and you learn to hold that position, get efficient, get into the next position. Your feet swing off, that costs you like, 2 or 3 moves right there.
Sure. Any cautions with this integrated strength and integrated power training?
Rest more than you think you should. And don't, I think the thing is always like, it's what you did, not how it felt. Like if
That's
if
important.
you're measuring exercise by how sweaty you are, or how nauseous you are, or how fatigued you feel, you're blowing it, because those are side effects of work. And like I'll talk to people and in terms that they understand. Like if you were studying and you got a headache, you wouldn't say, "Oh wow, I must really be learning." Like, no, you have a headache for some other reason. You could be sweating because the gym is hot, and it could have nothing to do with the work you're doing. And so you've always got to look at your numbers. Did I campus better? Did I send a harder boulder problem? Did I lift more weight? Was I able to hang that edge that I'd never been able to hang before? Those are the metrics you need to follow.
Yeah, and I think even if you don't quite do those things, like maybe you weren't able to hang that edge yet, I think it still goes back to what you did. Were you working toward that rather than did I get tired? Yeah,
and we messed up. Like there's so many things that I have very few regrets on like the way I've lived my life, but I have so many on how I trained for climbing. Yeah. We used to burn out at the end of the day on routes that were too hard to burn out on. Like you would just go till you couldn't even lift your arms up to the next hold, and thinking, oh man, my endurance is going to be so good. But what's really interesting, when you're over your anaerobic threshold and working at that level, the primary response is to improve the oxygen uptake or the aerobic capacity of your system. And so we're better able to uptake oxygen after training that way. But what the limiting factor in climbing is almost always muscular endurance.
Sure.
And muscular endurance is better developed slightly below that anaerobic threshold. Mm-hmm. And so if you can work up to that threshold and then back down, work up to it and back down, like interval style stuff,
right?
But don't go over that red line, you're going to be training the right stuff. You start redlining or going over or doing like Tabata,
right,
dead hangs or something. We were developing this ability to deliver oxygen rather than the muscle's ability to pick it up. We're oxygenating the blood better, but we're not doing anything about what's actually limiting us climbing. And so I learned, over the years from various climbers, if you are going to burn out, like kick it way back, like to something that's not going to degrade your skill. You're going to be able to climb it smoothly and well. And don't go until you're pumped so silly that you can't climb anymore, because that just is prolonging your recovery. And maximizing recovery is the whole name of the game in climbing.
Yeah, and I've said this before, and I'll make mention of it here again, but I think there is a time to train that way, but it's when and when I say that way, I mean getting stupid pumped and going to failure like that. I think the time to do that is when you're learning to climb, and you need to learn how to climb when you're pumped, and you need to find out where your limits are, because so many beginners just say take because they think they're going to fall on a move when in reality they've got 10 or 12 moves left. So I think to learn those things, you have to push that. And for my money, it's better to do it in the gym while you're training than to learn it on your projects over 4 weekends, so... But then I think it should end. I don't think you need to train that way again after you've learned those skills.
Yeah. Well, and I think once in a while, like once a month, go nuts and have a mega hard day, because it is nice to know that you can still pull that out, because you're gonna do it on a hard red point or whatever. Yep. But the idea that like that's what it takes is sort of a little misdirected. But I agree with you in that, like, God, it's nice to know that you can be that wickedly pumped and bring it back. And that's one of those things, like those recovery intervals where you climb till you're pretty pumped, then find a shakeout hold and shake out there. Those are very useful for 5'11", 5'12" climbers to understand that the pump isn't the end of the day.
Right.
And so, yeah, I see where you're coming from on that.
Yeah. All right. We're going to have to stop talking, or we're just going to take up all of our future talks. So thanks again for sitting down. I'm going to let you get back to work here.
Yeah, sure thing. We'll talk
do it again soon. All right. Another great talk with Honorary Co-Host Steve Bechtel is in the books. I've been using Steve's integrated strength training principles quite a bit with myself and with my clients, and frankly, I've had good results. Does it work? Hard to tell yet. But what it definitely does do is free up time and make programming a little simpler, for the busy person. So I really, really appreciate that about it. And you can find Steve at climbstrong.com. As usual. Definitely check out what he's doing over there. Find him on the Facebooks and the Instagrams. He's always posting really great information, so definitely look him up. Before I get out of here, I want to let you guys know that we've got some cool new things coming in 2017. We've been developing a couple of spin-off ideas for the podcast, and frankly, I'm pretty stoked about those. You'll see. I can't tell you much more, but you'll see very, very soon. Also, I've got a bonus for you guys, a Christmas episode. It's not really about Christmas, but it's a Christmas episode because I'm going to put it out for you around Christmas. And it's going to help us get to 24 episodes for the year. And if I didn't finish with an even number, my good friend Yasmin would probably freak out. So I'm going to finish with 24. We'll make it 2 a month for our first year. Maybe we can up that. If you guys become patrons and really want this thing to keep going, we may end up with 3 a month this coming year. We'll see. We got lots and lots of great conversations, podversations, coming. And yeah, you guys know what to do. Shares on your social medias, the Facebooks, the Instagrams. You can also find us on the Pinterests. I don't know what happens over there at Pinterest, but some of you do, because we're popular over there, which is cool. Where you cannot find us, however, are the Twitters. We don't tweet. We scream like eagles.
This time, this time to build. 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 This time power. This time to build 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 power. This time to build. 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 This time